Mark Zuckerberg said the move is inspired by US election results and will restore free speech and expression. Let's have a listen to what he said yesterday.
We're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms. More specifically, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US.
Well, even Donald Trump has responded to this one. Let's have a listen.
I think they've come a long way. Meta, Facebook. I think they've come a long way. I watched it. The man was very impressive. I watched it. Actually, I watched it on Fox. I'm not allowed to say that. Say it?
Do you think he's directly responding to the threats that you have made to him in the past?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
Probably, he says. Let's speak with Anna Mikhailova, Deputy Political Editor at The Mail on Sunday. Good afternoon to you, Anna.
Good afternoon.
So we're both part of legacy media, apparently. That's the way it now works. And I think legacy media is a term used as I think it's a pejorative. I think it's meant to suggest we're the old guard. The new kids on the block are coming in the form of Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. Well, firstly, before we dissect that fully, what do you make of Zuckerberg's comments that the fact checkers are going in the bin?
Well, I welcome the principle of what he says, which is that he is trying to do it in defense of free speech. It is fascinating to hear him finally.
And I think we've just lost Anna's line at that specific point. Was that... There's no conspiracy there, by the way. We're talking about cover-ups in the media and what you don't get to hear. Maybe the authorities, maybe the Ofcom boys said, we don't want to hear this. Anna is back with us. It's interesting that talking about truth and what you're allowed to say on the media, we get cut off halfway through, Anna, but you're back with us. You were responding to Mark Zuckerberg's comments.
Yeah, so I think the problem with what he says is he admits finally that political content, for example, was being downgraded so that people wouldn't be stressed. I mean, how sinister is that? It goes to the heart of what people are concerned about with social media. I do have a lot of sympathy with your caller's comment about how do we know what to trust in mainstream media, but as you were saying, we have regulation, we have legal teams, we are regulated by something called IPSO, whereas social media is not. And I think while I welcome the spirit of what Zuckerberg is saying, the actual problem with a lot of what he does is they are utterly untransparent about the algorithms that are used to display certain news stories from certain organisations over others. And I think until they are willing to be transparent, and this is what a lot of campaigners have called for, and MPs who have tried to look into this have called for, unless they're willing to be transparent, then what he says doesn't mean a hell of a lot.
And there is a, you know, in defence of mainstream, or what is called mainstream media, for example, in print journalism, which I think gets perhaps disproportionately more scrutiny in this argument, you couldn't just sit there and write a story because, you know, oh, you've heard that an MP is having an affair with XYZ, I think I'll print it. Your editor would then go, well, can you stand that story up? Is there any evidence of this? Have you double-checked? Have you double-sourced it? Can you, have you called all the parties involved and all of that? That's the process of, I mean, you don't even have to think about that on a daily basis, right? I mean, it's just something you do as a journalist. But, of course, on social media, you don't have to do any of that. You can just say whatever you like.
Well, look, we know people can't say whatever they like because there have been cases of people taken to court for defamation.
Well, that's true. Yes, you can't libel somebody.
But the truth is, as you say, it is a hell of a lot more difficult. And not only are newspapers regulated, individual journalists have their own reputations to think of. So there is reputational damage in just writing, as people might fear, anything you want or anything that's unsourced. But I think the way that social media companies have promoted some content from some political views and suppressed others is extremely sinister. And until that's properly regulated, then we don't have much of a free speech going on. We do have to admit that a lot of people, particularly young people, rely on social media for their news. That is the world we live in. But it makes me feel very uncomfortable when those social media sites just do not declare how they choose to promote some stories, some news articles, and not others.
And it was always interesting, wasn't it, that when X was Twitter before Musk came along with the dollars and purchased it, there was always a suspicion that this was a bit of a sort of a left-wing cartel. And if you went a bit right, you got kicked off. Even the president himself got kicked off of Twitter, which I always thought was extraordinary and completely bonkers and bizarre, because, you know, free speech and all the rest of it is meant to, you know, come with warts and all. And, you know, if Al-Qaeda can have an account on Twitter, I'm sure the President of the United States should have one, etc. And lots of people on the right understandably complained about that. Now, of course, we've got a situation where people on the left are complaining, saying, hang on a second, you know, it's gone the other way. So we're still not getting the truth, because there is a disproportionality in the kind of tweets I'm seeing that seem to come from right-wing accounts more than left-wing accounts. I have to say, as a user, I didn't notice it either way, other than the fact there were some high-profile people kicked off. But generally speaking, that seems to be how confirmation bias accepted and all the rest of it, that seems to be how it's now viewed. The left are saying, we've been left out. And I would imagine Facebook users might make the same argument after this recent announcement.
Yeah, yes. I think for all of this, you have to slightly separate people's perception of Twitter and these other sites when they first started, which was a bit of a breath of fresh air, frankly, a space where people could finally voice their views, whatever they were, and have what they thought was a sensible discussion. Sadly, it all fell into it became a bit of a cesspit. You had a problem with trolls, you had a problem with false accounts, and I don't think those companies have ever recovered from that. I do think the public is smarter than some of these reports make out, because people are discerning. They do understand when they read things as well that there is opinion there and there is a bit of a bias there, you know, whichever bias you're talking about. But I think ultimately, when you look at someone like Mark Zuckerberg, he is a businessman. Yeah. He is a billionaire who is trying to pursue his companies and his shareholders' interests, and that is what we remember. He's not some martyr of either free speech or tech anymore. He is a businessman. Yeah, spot on. Listen, Anna, thank you. Always good to talk. Anna Mikhailova, who is the Deputy Political Editor at The Mail on Sunday, with us on the programme.